Well, good morning again, everyone. How are you doing today? Good. Is it good to be here? Yes, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for leading us. Shay and I were talking. I think we did the math and realized that we've been friends about 10 years. I've gotten the privilege to get to partner with her at retreats like this many, many times. And I'm always so moved and ministered to by how she leads and how she plays piano. How many of you ever at some point in your life took piano lessons? Yeah, and how many of you, it ended badly? And is anyone else? Yes, I also took piano lessons when I was little. My first piano teacher, not my favorite, Mr. B, but my second piano teacher, I really loved him. His name was Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner was the music director at the church that was tied to the Christian school that I went to growing up. And so I already knew Mr. Warner because I was in like the kids choir and all that stuff. So we had a pretty great relationship until the spring recital of 1985. I was 12 years old at that time, and while I loved music, I did not like practicing piano. Same. I won't make you raise your hand on that, but we know who you are. And then to add to that, I not only didn't like practicing, but I'm a little bit of a procrastinator. So those things don't go well together. If you like to procrastinate and you don't like to practice, what that results in is a student who has not learned her piano piece in time for the recital. So that afternoon, I called Mr. Warner and I was like, hey, yeah, I'm not going to go tonight. And he was like, no, you got to go. Like, this is a recital that we all go to. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And we kind of argued back and forth a little bit. And he's like, no, you have to go. Like, the program's already printed. Your name is in there. And I'm like, there's no way I can do it. I just cannot do it. It's going to be so bad. And then he was like, okay, look, I'll even let you have your music up there with you. Now, this was a big concession because everyone had to memorize their music. So I was thankful, but here's the thing. That wasn't going to help me. Like, if you don't know it doesn't matter if the notes are in front of you. You're not going to be able to do it. And so I just was like, no, I can't do it. And he's like, no, you need to be there. So I just didn't show up. And the next day, I get called out of class because remember, like, he's part of the world of the Christian school I was in. And so he was just over in his music office at the church and he called the office and then they called me and I had to come to the office and he proceeded to tell me like how disappointed he was in me and that he can't really have a student that's not gonna like follow him. And so that was the day I got fired from piano lessons. A lot of people quit piano, not this one. Piano quit me is what I like to say. And so then after that, I just kind of did my best to like avoid Mr. Warner because again, I would see him around, but it doesn't feel good knowing that you've let someone down. And so I would sort of just try to scurry away if he was there, or if we did talk, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, things are great. I'm doing well. I'm definitely still playing piano. Yeah, all that. And I would just pretend that everything was fine instead of kind of trying to take any responsibility about how I had let him down or how I had failed. And so what happened then is this, of course, inevitably, there was this distance between Mr. Warner and me where we really weren't close anymore. And eventually, I didn't really have any relationship at all with him. And that's the thing about disappointment. We kind of function in a paradigm when it comes to disappointment, and it goes kind of a certain way. They react to being disappointed by us by sort of like rejecting us a little, or maybe withholding from us a little. Maybe you feel like they like you a little bit less. That's sort of how I felt. And then what we tend to do in response to that is we then withdraw from them, which is sort of like us withholding from them. And inevitably, what happens in this scenario is that a separation occurs. So play it out in our normal life. Say that you're supposed to meet up with a friend for dinner. And then you kind of flake out, and like 5 minutes before you're supposed to be there, you text them to say that you're not gonna make it. And so, of course, they're gonna be disappointed. They might even be a little bit mad. And maybe what they do is they just reach out like a little less often to invite you to dinner. But then you respond by kind of getting a little irritated about that. Like, I mean, what's their problem, right? What's wrong with that? And so then when they do reach out, maybe you're a little cold to them, or you leave them hanging a little bit longer, and then separation occurs. Or say that you are in a fight, an argument with your spouse, and say that it's like mostly your fault. And they say that they forgive you, but maybe they're a little cold for a few days, maybe not as affectionate as usual. And then you kind of react to that because you're irritated that they're irritated because you irritated them. Those are just some examples. My guess is that you know how this goes. You've experienced this paradigm where there's disappointment and then withholding and then separation. It's pretty common for us to experience this in our relationships. And so it's no wonder that we put this same paradigm on God when we disappoint him, when we feel like we've let him down. We've certainly all done things that are not what God would have wanted us to do. So he must be disappointed with us. And I got to admit, even right there, I feel a little bit weird saying that because I don't believe that God is disappointed in us, like we're a disappointment to God. Like your kids are not a disappointment to you. Sure, they might do something that disappoints you, that you wish they had done differently, but you're not disappointed in them. You're disappointed with what they've done. And so sometimes when I talk to people and they share with me, they confide in me as their pastor that they feel like they're a disappointment to God. And I say, you're not a disappointment to God. And that's true. But I wonder if maybe it would be more helpful to think about it like you're not a disappointment to God, but I think God might be disappointed, no doubt. I mean, we've done things that disappoint God. I've noticed in conversations like this, what is underneath it, if you peel back a little bit, is that they feel like they've let God down. And maybe that's true. What if God does get disappointed by us? And that doesn't feel good to say. See, when we disappoint somebody and we feel that we've let them down, there's a lot of shame that goes with that and guilt. And we know that through Jesus, we are set free from shame and guilt, that we are forgiven, that we're already made new. And we also believe, though, that God does have hopes and expectations for us, right? He wants us to live in the new life that he's given us. So when we don't, it makes sense that he might be disappointed. So what do we do with that? If our natural tendency when we've disappointed someone is to withdraw because we feel like they don't feel good about us, is that what we do when we feel like we've disappointed God? But the problem with that is that separating from God is exactly the thing we're trying not to do. It's exactly the thing that we trust Jesus to fix for us, the separation that we have from God because of our sin. So where does that leave us? Like, how do we break this very familiar paradigm in us that creates separation when we are the one who feels like we've let God down? Well, this morning, we're going to explore a different way that we might respond when we have disappointed God. And if you practice this, I believe that it will deepen your life with God. I believe it will actually be very life-giving and transformative. But to do it, you're going to have to really lean into hope. Hope that you have in who God is and who he wants to be in your life. And to start, we've got to kind of back up one step and really get our heads around something that we believe to be true of God, that sometimes it's kind of easy to overlook, because we've got to get our heads around this, because this particular belief about God, how we hold this belief about God, will determine how you respond to him. And it will impact your ability to be able to hold on to hope even when that happens. And if we can really believe that this thing is true of God, then we will spend our life being freed from this paradigm that we're trapped in. And we're going to be doing that by looking in 1 John today, in a chunk out of chapter 4. So if you have your Bible, if you want to follow along, again, I'll have it up on the slides. We're going to be in 1 John chapter 4. I want to warn you about this passage, though. It's a little bit of a word salad. Like, it's got a lot kind of going on and mixed in there. So what I want to do is I want to read the whole passage so we get a feel for the whole passage. And then we'll go in and we'll dig in deeper and see what this teaches us about God and how we can hope in that is true of him. So we're going to start in verse 9, 1 John chapter 4. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only son into the world so that we might live through him. We're going to jump to 15. If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in them and they in God. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. 17, this is how love is made complete among us so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. Okay, you see what I mean? It is so good. It is so rich. And it's kind of convoluted, right? It says a lot. And so just to kind of like make it even more confusing, we're going to start at the end and work backwards. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah, okay, good. You don't have a choice. I'm going to do it anyway. But we're going to start at the end. Verse 19, super short verse. I'm going to read it and then you're going to read it out loud. It says, we love because he first loved us. Let's say that together out loud. Here we go. We love because he first loved us. I love this verse because it is short. It is so important. If you are looking to memorize a verse, this is a good one because there's hardly any words. You want to write a song, you could write a song about this. It would be like such a short song, but so powerful. Now, love is an important word in here. Obviously, it says it twice, so we don't want to disregard that. But the word that I want to start with, that we've got to start with, is the word first. That's where we've got to start with this about God, because it lays the whole theological foundation of everything else we're going to build on, which is this. God is the initiator of his love for us. If you experience love between you and God, it started with God loving you first. Think about that like a baby and a parent. The parent loves the baby. The baby does not yet love the parent. I mean, sure, it's dependent on the parent. It feels a closeness. It feels a connectedness. But if love is a choice, if love is an action, then we wouldn't say that a baby loves its parent. And we read, God first loved us. And if we dig into that, it touches on some really profound truths about God that might actually mess with us a little bit, mess with a little bit of what we believe about God. Here's what I mean. When love is given first, it means that the one who is loved, the one who the love is given to, they have the freedom to accept or reject that love. Love is offered, and now there's a choice on the other person's part whether or not to receive that love. So right there, it means that whoever initiates the love is putting themselves in a place of vulnerability. They might be rejected. There's a risk there. To truly love humanity, God has granted us autonomy, and that means we choose whether or not we're going to love him back. And that opens God up to the possibility to be hurt, to be ignored, to feel betrayed. And I don't know about you, but for me, that's unsettling to think about God experiencing those things. You know, for some reason, it's easier to ascribe those feelings to the person of Jesus than it is to think about it as God the Father feeling those things. I mean, we know Jesus was hurt. I mean, he was certainly betrayed, but isn't it a little bit weird to think about God the Father, all powerful, all knowing, God of the universe, as being vulnerable, choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to be impacted by us. If God loves us, then by nature of what love is, he is choosing to be vulnerable, to be affected by the choices of those he loves. All right, hold on to that just for a second, because what we also know, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, is that love is embodied in action. We can't just say, I love you. There has to be action behind it, or it might just be words. It might not even be true. Love is proven by action. So the first one to offer love is not only making themselves vulnerable, but they start out by an action, giving something. And so when we read that he first loved us, first indicates that something happened at a certain point in time. What was it that happened? What was the action that proved God's love for us? Well, let's go back to our passage and see what it says. We're going backwards, remember? So we're going to go up to verse 9, actually. It says this: God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. Before any of us were born, God proved his love through Jesus. Okay, let's just pause for a second, because some of you might be asking, what does any of this have to do with disappointment? Like, why did we spend the whole first part of this talking about disappointment? Thank you for asking. Let's go back to the paradigm that I was telling you about a few minutes ago. In most of our relationships, here's how the paradigm goes. We disappoint someone. They withhold from us affection, attention, maybe even love. And then we respond by withholding from them, either by not being genuine with them or pretending that we've learned from what we did wrong or just distancing ourselves. And then separation occurs. Intimacy is put on hold. Let me just remind you how this works in real life. So step one, say that you disappoint somebody by sharing, they told you a secret, maybe something in confidence, and you broke that confidence, you told someone else, and then that person finds out. So you go on to step two, and that's where the friend or your spouse or whatever, they're disappointed in you, and so they're gonna pull back a little. Maybe they're not going to share with you so freely. And you're going to feel a little bit of separation because they're withholding some trust from you, rightly so. You broke their confidence. But even if it's deserved, it doesn't feel good. It never feels good to feel like you let someone down that you love. And so in response, what we do is we do step 3. And it looks one of 2 ways. Either we work extra hard to make it look like we're better than we are. So like if it happens again, if they confide in you and you again break their confidence and then they find out about it, what we'll do is we'll lie. And we'll say, no, I never told, because we want to look better than we are. Or another option we do in that 3rd step is we just kind of double down on the separation. We make our own separation with them, and we give them the cold shoulder, and we avoid them, or we keep things kind of surfacey, and we refuse to go deep. Either way, it gets us to step 4. There's a relational block that happens on both sides. And however the block got there, what happens as a result is the relationship cannot grow. Intimacy cannot deepen. And this is a paradigm that we're very used to. We almost cannot help but live according to this. When we let someone down, we want to just run and hide. It's like if you're the first person at a red light, and just for maybe like a couple seconds, you don't pay attention. I'm not saying you're on your phone. I'm just, whatever. And then the light turns green, and then somebody behind you honks. And then what do? You take off real fast, because the last thing you want is for them to catch up to you and make eye contact with you and see how shameful you feel. At least that's what I hope you feel when I honk at you. The point is, this is a paradigm that we're very used to. We live it out. We live it out in small traffic ways. We live it out in big, lifelong relationship ways. And so, of course, we think this is how it goes with God. We mess up. God pulls back. We respond by faking it or distancing ourselves from God. And inevitably, there's a block. But there's something really important that's missing in this paradigm when it comes to God. See, he doesn't do step 2. But if we don't believe that, we still move on to step 3. Let me say that again, because this whole thing depends on us getting this. God doesn't do step 2, the part where the other one withholds. God doesn't do that. What we do, though, is we still move on to step 3. We fake things with God a little bit, maybe keep things a little surfacey, or we polish ourselves up to try to look better in front of God as if he doesn't know what's really happening. We do that. Or another way that we do that is we just distance ourselves from God. We pray a little less. We maybe isolate ourselves from other Christian friends who we know are going to ask deeper questions about how we're really doing. We become suddenly too busy to connect with God. It's like we're auto-programmed to retreat, either literally or we just spiritually back away. And we think that if God is disappointed, he will withhold from me, maybe even love me a little less. When we believe that we've disappointed God, we naturally jump to the conclusion that I am less loved. And ultimately, when that happens, we block any real growth or intimacy that might happen in our relationship with him. When we withhold because we've disappointed God, we prevent any growth or richness in our life with him. Our pulling away, it stalls our intimacy with God. If you want to know why you've been a Christian for 25 years and you still feel like you're not as close to God as you wish and as you hoped, it's likely that you have felt like you've disappointed him. And so you've pulled away. And ironically, that starts a whole other cycle in us where then we realize that we're disappointed in ourselves because we pulled away from God. And then we once again feel like we've let God down even more. And so we separate even more. And this becomes a chronic and an unhealthy cycle. But in the midst of all of it, there is hope. It doesn't have to be this way because, see, God's invitation to a new sequence is there for you, where, yes, disappointment still happens. We still might disappoint God, but the love is not withheld. His love for us is not changed. Remember, God showed his love first, which means it was nothing to do with us or our behavior. It existed before we were even born. God chose to risk being disappointed. He chose to be vulnerable to disappointment. But when he experiences that disappointment, it does not change his love for us. His love is not conditional. And when this happens, we are invited into that same vulnerability that God has and models with us. And if we are able to step into that vulnerability with God, then we'll become even more intimate with him. A couple of months ago, I made a deal with God. I don't recommend it, but I did, kind of. I have a friend who was pretty angry at me about something, and it's not something that I did. Trust me, I do plenty of things wrong where people are mad at me for truly legitimate reasons. This was a thing I needed to be a part of as a leader at our church, and it kind of just went that way. It was an inevitable thing that happened, but I knew that he was very angry at me, that he had a lot of anger that was stewing. And so we've just sort of been avoiding each other. I hadn't seen him in a while, but I felt like God wanted me to go out of my way to connect with this person. And so this is the deal I made with God. I was like, okay, fine. I will be open and friendly to him, but you, God, you have to make an opportunity for it to happen. Okay. Like you give me a window and I'll do it. That's our deal. Okay. So the next day, literally the next day, I'm walking into Costco and he's walking out and he doesn't see me. And I look and I just freeze and I didn't do it. And I just walked the other way and I knew God wanted me to do it and I didn't do it. Later, I was praying about it and I noticed in my attitude, I was kind of just like, yeah, God, sorry about that. Let's just move on. Like that was sort of how it was. Like, I don't feel good about this thing I did. I don't want to get into it. Let's just move on and forgiveness, all that. Yeah. And what I was really doing there in that was withdrawing. I was withdrawing from God. But see, also I knew I was going to be teaching you a message on this. And I thought, probably I should try to practice what I preach. So I decided instead to risk being vulnerable back to God. And so in that moment, I sat in that. God, I blew it. I said I was going to do this, and you did what I asked, and I still couldn't do it. I failed. And I didn't feel like God was condemning me in that. I actually felt like God was sad. Like as if he was like, that wasn't for me. Like I created that opportunity for you. Like that was something that would be good for you. So I sat with that a little and then I made a new deal with God. And I was like, okay, God, if you give me another chance and I'll do it this time. Now you guys gotta know, I barely ever run into this guy just out in the world. Like this is rare to see him one time. So I was like, I'm probably good because it's probably not gonna happen again. But sure enough, The next day, I was in downtown Livermore where I live. I went into this little store that I wasn't planning to go into, that I never do go into, and he was there. And again, he didn't see me. This guy does not pay attention to anything going on around him. So I was like, in that moment, I had that same moment, and I was like, I could just turn around and leave, and he wouldn't know it, but I was like, no, this is what God and I talked about. So I go over, and we talk, and it's awkward. The whole conversation, surfacey and uncomfortable and awkward. And in the middle of it, I had such a deep sense of, this is right. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what obedience is in this moment. And after that, I was gonna just like go back to shopping, but I again had this little moment where I was like, I gotta notice this moment here. And I left and I went around the corner and sat on this bench, and I reflected on what just happened, and I actually got kind of emotional in that moment. And I realized that I felt in that moment so seen by God. Like that he would curate a moment like that for me. And had I not leaned into the vulnerability the day before, I just don't think I would have experienced God's love that way that day. Just because I was honest about how I had messed up. When we're vulnerable, it creates connection. We know this is true. God made the first move. He already chose to be vulnerable with us just by loving us. And so we're left with the decision of, will we be vulnerable back? And if we decide to be vulnerable with God, it will only happen when we really believe that his love will not go away. We have to believe that this is true of God. We have to put our hope in the sureness of God's abiding, unchanging, undiminishing love for us. And that's what John is talking about in the passage when he writes this in verse 16. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. It says that we know how much he loves us. This is about a head knowledge. We choose to believe it. But then when it says we rely on this love, that is more about us being convinced that his love is reliable, convinced that it's real. Now, that's where it gets tricky, because you can't just tell yourself to be convinced of something. You have to test it. You have to try it. You have to experiment with it and then watch what happens. And the best way that we can do this is when we disappoint God, that we lean toward him instead of away. John continues this same thought in verse 18. He says, there is no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear. Remember, God doesn't do step 2. We don't have to be afraid of losing his love, because God's love is not based on how good or how bad we are. It's based on him giving it as a gift before we ever did anything, good or bad. And so again, we're left with this invitation to discover if his love is real. And we do that by choosing to be vulnerable with God, even after we've disappointed him. It's God's unconditional, unwithheld love that safeguards our vulnerability. It is in that reality that we are empowered to be vulnerable. And so what does that look like? How do we lean into that love? How do we strengthen our hope in God and live in his love for us? Well, in our last couple of minutes, I want to talk about what vulnerability might look like. Chances are, since we're all human, we've all probably done something wrong in the last few days. I'm just going to blanket statement that. Yes, Shaya? Okay. Shea has done something wrong in the last. Some way that we've disappointed God, real recent. We all can say that that's true. What if instead of pulling away, instead of glossing over it, what if you take a risk on God's love and you choose to be vulnerable with him? Here are some ways that that can look. When you talk to God about your sins or your failures, I know Mark mentioned last night, every night when he goes to bed, he reflects on the day and confesses. When you do that, instead of general vague confessions, like maybe you might say, I confess my dishonesty or forgive me for the wrong that I've done, getting really specific, that's vulnerable. Clearly naming, identifying the actual thing that you did wrong. God, I lied to my friend because I was embarrassed about what I did. And then I acted self-righteous and defensive. And I'm sorry, God. I know that's not how you want me to treat my friends. Be specific. Another way to be vulnerable is to bring up things that you've done wrong that nobody has found out about. I mean, it's one thing to regret and confess something because you got caught. But if you choose to be vulnerable, it's what if you bring up something to God just because you know it was wrong, even if no one else knows you do it or you did it. You're not stuck between a rock and a hard place because you got found out. You're choosing to expose your wrong. What might that look like in your life? You can also be vulnerable by asking God for help. You know, that same thing in us that doesn't want to disappoint God is the same thing that wants, that kind of drives us to try to prove ourselves to God, right? Like, I can do this, God. I'm strong. I believe. In other words, like, I don't need your help. Look how good I'm going to do. You see that? So vulnerability is also expressed in telling God where you need his help, his grace, his strength, his mercy. That's vulnerable. How do you need God's help? Could you ask him specifically to help you? Another way to be vulnerable, and this might feel very uncomfortable to some of us, is to tell him when you feel like he's let you down. Being honest with God about how you feel about him is vulnerable. And then let me give you one more. Sitting in lament or regret, like letting yourself feel bad, is vulnerable. When we live as forgiven people, it's very easy to sort of claim that forgiveness and move on. But there is something really formative and powerful about letting yourself feel bad about a choice that you made. Sometimes as you sit in that remorse, like we talked about yesterday, that's where God meets you in a really specific way that you might miss if you don't let yourself sit in the regret. And when he meets you, that confirms his love for you. That's the test. That's what we're talking about. You can be confident and put your hope in God because of who he is. Today, as we head into the second day of camp, and you're away still from all the things, you've had a day to kind of let the rest of the busyness of life kind of fade away. What would it be today to take some time to practice some of this vulnerability? So that while you're up here, you're doing something that is actually strengthening your belief that God's love for you will never lessen or change or diminish. Because when you really believe that, then when it happens inevitably that you disappoint God, it will simply be another invitation to his love. I want to ask as the band comes up that maybe we take time as we sing this last song together to think about what vulnerability feels prompted in you. Maybe you stay seated and you just talk with God. Maybe you confess. Maybe you ask him for specific help. Maybe you ask him to help you trust his love. Let me pray as we do that now. God, you are the great lover of our souls. You, God, before everything, chose to love us, flawed people, people who continually disappoint you. And we don't know what to do with that kind of love because it's not what we see anywhere else but you. Jesus, we ask that we would stand so securely on the foundation of the proven act of love that you did on the cross, that we would stand in the victory of the empty grave. God, that we would, in this moment with you, be invited, be loved. God, we give you our gratitude. We owe everything to you. Help us, God, help us.